Thank you, Mick. Delighted to be here. My name is Sue, and I'm a recovering journalist. That's my admission. By show of applause, so we're ready to clap our hands. Who here thinks the news is too negative or depressing? Yep. It's something I hear a lot all the time. Even though we've just been through one of the most positive periods in news, thanks to who? The Matildas. Did I hear someone say the Matildas? Yeah, the Matildas. So, history makers, women's sport gets a free kick, Speechless, crazy. So we all felt really good about that. But interestingly, in the last week, since all that happened, I've seen the rise of a few negative stories. The dark truth behind the World Cup. England get away with murder. Outrage over that kiss. And even a Muslim preacher in Melbourne ranting about people it not being okay to watch women play sport. And I was amazed that actually got pride of place on the homepage of news.com.au. Like, really? Is there nothing else we could have found to talk about? But there is a tendency, obviously, in the business to think about if it bleeds, it leads. And that is a strategy that still exists today in the news. And I know that because I used to be a journalist. And when I started out in the media, I was bright-eyed and full of hope, and I thought I could change the world, and I'm going to go to uni and study journalism, and I'm going to come out and I'm going to right wrongs and catch out corrupt politicians and do all those kinds of things that you start out with when you want to be a journalist. And then somewhere along the way in that journey, that changed, and it moved from wanting to do something positive to being all about me and my ego and how could my career get ahead. Because when you're a journalist, the way you get ahead is by doing big stories. The bigger the story you do, the badder the story is, the more your career develops. And that's the unfortunate truth. So I found myself working away at getting better and better and better at being a journalist and doing more and more and more bad stories. I worked in it for 10 years. I worked here in Perth. I even went over to London and became a deputy news director over there. So I had all this great international experience. And I would talk about, even back then, and this is really showing my age now, how good it was I was there when Princess Diana died, because it was the story of the century. I look back now and I think, oh my gosh, the way I viewed the world was so skew-if. I came back and I got the best job I could get, which was news director, and I was news director of 6PR and 96FM. And throughout that journey, I started to realise the impact of what I was doing and that it was largely negative. So much so that I decided to try and change the way the news operated. I thought I could actually change this whole news thing myself, right here at 6PR. So I'm going to introduce a good news segment. So I started that process of trying to find good news stories, and it was actually quite hard because when we would ring organisations and say, you know, hi, it's Sue here from 6PR, we're just wondering if you have any good news for us today. You can imagine, yeah, it was either laughter, it was like, no, sorry, leave me alone, put the phone down, no comment. Because people were scared. What are you going to do with my good news? So, but we persevered and I got it going for 2 days, 2 whole days. We had enough good news stories stockpiled to get a good news story in every bulletin until the general manager happened to hear it on the radio. And I'll never forget him coming running down the corridor to my little office, swearing, I think he said the F word, get this effing good news, SHIT, off the air because nobody wants good news. And I just went, right, well, I can't change it. There was another thing that happened that really changed the course of my career, and that was a story that I did, which I now look back on, I'm surprised by what kind of person I was to have those thoughts back then. And what happened was I was getting to work early in the morning, like 4 o'clock in the morning to do the breakfast news. And the first thing you do as a journalist when you get to the work in the morning at that time is to find news quickly. So the way you do that is you ring the fire brigade, the ambulance and the police, and you find out about all the bad things that have happened overnight and you put those into the bulletin. And that's what you're trained to do. And that morning I woke up and I went to work and I rang the police and they told me about this terrible accident that had just happened. And it was a big accident. It was a truck that had run off one of the highways and it was going to cause traffic chaos. And I was like, yes, thank goodness, I've got news all morning. This is going to keep my bulletins going all morning. And I kept getting updates from the police. First of all, the fact that the accident happened. The next, that it had actually been a fatal accident, so someone had died. The next bit of news was that it had been a child who'd been killed in that accident. And the last story I did was that police released the name of the child who'd been killed. They had told the immediate family, and it was free information to share. So I read that story out, I named the child, police have released the name of the child who was killed in this morning's accident. It was the name. And I came out of the news booth, having read the news, and one of my junior staff who I'd employed, young lady, she was 21, she shouted out, "There's some bitch woman on the phone." And it took me back. I was like, what? Why are you? I just had this moment of like, I'm not like you. I wouldn't have said that. And then she said something that floored me. She said, "I think it's the mother of the kid who was killed in the accident." Just like that. Just like it didn't even matter. And I took a deep breath. I went into my office and I closed the door and I took that phone call. And I always get teary every time I tell the story, because it was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had with someone, because I had nothing that could legitimise my behaviour, nothing that would make it okay. And I found the only thing I could possibly say was that I was sorry. So I put the phone down and I made two decisions. The first was I decided we would change the news policy so we no longer reveal the names of people who'd been killed in accidents, because it served no purpose than to hurt other people. And I decided to leave the profession because I thought, I can't keep doing this for the rest of my life. This is it. I've reached the top. I'm going to keep doing this over and over again. So I left and I went to work in the dark side of PR. And it really did feel like that. And I kind of lost my way for a bit of what was I actually going to do with my life. But I've never let go of that feeling of hope that I could do something positive with my life, that I could have some kind of positive impact. And I feel finally that the time is now, that we're here to do something good, and I can use my skills for good. And I now employ a team of ex-journalists who all left for the same reason, now using their skills to help spread messages of positivity. So, by show of way of applause, ready to clap again, who no longer reads, watches or listens to the news? Yeah, some of you do, some of you don't. It's really interesting. Before COVID, prior to COVID, I would say we were in a period of peak negativity leading up to COVID, where our collective consciousness as a world, as the globe, was focused on the negative. And where does our collective consciousness come from? It comes from what we choose to focus on every single day. And it's hard to get away from the news. So even though while most or a good portion of us said we don't actually turn the TV on to watch the news in the evenings or specifically tune into the radio or look online, we still know about the news. We still all knew about the Matildas. We couldn't escape it. You couldn't escape it if you tried. It's all through your social media feeds. You go to the doctor's surgery and the TV's on and you see the stuff that's going on. It's very hard to be completely immune from the news. And the thing about the news is it's about what is, not what isn't. So you're only going to get the stories about the stuff that happens. They're not going to cover the volcano that didn't erupt. They're not going to cover the fire that didn't happen or the bag that didn't get snatched from the old lady. They're going to cover the bad stuff that happens. The reality is, though, that our view of the world is out of touch with reality. And I think we are starting to become more educated in this way, that we know that our biases, things that we click on, means we see more of that stuff. So if you happen to be clicking on the news, you're going to start seeing more of that and you're going to start believing that that is what the world is. Interestingly, though, Steven Pinker, who's a Harvard University professor, says the world has never been more peaceful. The world has never actually been more peaceful than right now, even though we might think that that's quite different. So we know some amazing facts, like the number of people who've been involved in violent war crime deaths is the lowest level in 25 years. The number of homicides in Sydney is, the rate is 1 in 100,000, which is the lowest since 1989. But you don't get to hear about those things. So what is good news? It's not the grumpy cat. So I'm not talking about those little kind of funny memes and stuff that keeps you amused. There are plenty of really important good things happening in the world. So for example, Iraq is in a period of peace it's never known before. Since 2003, it's been having regular democratic elections. World hunger is at its lowest level since in the last 25 years. The giant panda is no longer on the extinction list. 80% of new power in Europe comes from renewable resources. Coal is on the way out in Europe. India has banned all forms of disposable plastic in Delhi. Childhood cancer death rates have fallen to their lowest level, dropped by 40% in the last 15 years. So these are the kinds of stories that are good news, that are important, that we would love to start seeing more of. There is an economic case for good news. So I know the media says, well, no one wants good news, but that is not true. There's been studies showing that consumers will spend more money on products and services that are advertised alongside positive content than negative content. Positive news stories are shared 3 times more on social media than negative stories. And I really do feel, as Mick was saying at the start, that we are in an era, a new era of collaboration, of community, of purpose, of profit and purpose together, of creativity, of joy. We heard about joy being mentioned during the Matildas the last couple of weeks, the joy that it brought to the country. Opportunity and connection. So what is the solution then for the news? Thankfully, there is a movement towards this now, where the media is realising it does need to change if it's going to have longevity. It can't keep just relying on that old idea of if it bleeds, it leads. So solutions-focused news, where you can talk about the situation, you can talk about what's happened, but you can include a positive element and some solutions in the story as well. And the research shows that that actually leads to greater engagement, that the audience will read, watch and listen until the end of the story. They won't just skim the first line and say, I don't want to know about it. The audience feels uplifted and positive, and they're more likely to take action. They're more likely to say, you know what, we can do something about this, particularly the stories that provide that vehicle. This is what everyone who's reading or watching or listening can do about this. It's actually called constructive journalism, and it's now being taught at universities in Europe. It's being led out of the Scandinavian countries, of course. Thank God for the Scandinavian countries. Where they're looking at, okay, when I went to uni, you rang the police and you found out all the bad stuff and you wrote a story about it. Now they're looking at how do we broaden it out so it's not just black and white. There's nuances, there's different perspectives, there's solutions, there's constructive dialogue. And if you get that right in the media, it's sufficiently interesting to engage people, and they're left with those feelings: inspiration, engagement, empowerment, and resilience, which is what we need more than anything in the world right now. And so not only are they teaching this in universities in Europe, but the media in Sweden, Denmark, Belgium, and Spain are introducing this as a way of crafting their news stories. So the movement has begun, which I'm really excited about. I am a recovering journalist who's now a constructive journalist, and my vehicles to change the world have changed. So I'm no longer trying to change it from the inside. I run a PR agency, Profile Media. We've been doing PR for 17X. Mick was on the radio yesterday afternoon. We work with clients, we're intentional about who we work with. We want to work with clients who have some kind of positive impact because we're really good at getting people into the media, and we want to make sure that they're the stories that we can be proud of. And we have launched our passion project, which is the Good News Movement. And our tagline for that is, if you could join a movement that inspired a change in the way the news is reported so there's more positivity, would you join it? Would you join it? Would you join it? We would love you to join us. So you can subscribe to the Good News Movement on our website. You can give us a like on Facebook or Instagram. And I say to people, a like on those pages is a vote for more positivity in the news. Thank you very much.